Uh-oh.
We got
Howdy.
lighting.
Now what happened to our lighting?
Yeah.
There we go. Too much coming through the sun. How's everybody doing?
Doing good. How you guys doing?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Everybody here, I think, has either met Justin or knows Justin. Uh, and this will be recorded. This will be uploaded to the course for people who want to watch in Futureland, or some people will be watching in Futureland who didn't make it here today. Trying to do the different course calls different days of the week for people who have different schedules who can't always make the Tuesday night stuff. If you would, can you
Mhm.
tell us what your portfolio looks like currently?
Yeah, current portfolio, I'm sitting on 33 properties in 3 states. And I have, of the 33, 30 are 100% me, and I have three that are with partners. And I'm actually been downsizing. So I'm under a motto of less is more lately. So I was at 45 properties, now down to 33.
And so the ones that you're down, that's the ones in Milwaukee that you're kind of exiting, or are you exiting partnerships?
Both.
Okay.
So I had two partnerships with two properties each. One was with my mom and one was with my brother. Sold out of those two each. I sold out of my Detroit stuff. I had three there. And then in Milwaukee, I sold four as well. And then I 1031 and then bought a couple in Seattle area.
I see your hand there for a second, Chester.
Yeah, it kind of piqued my interest when I heard Detroit, and I was like, just curious why you're divesting from the properties in Detroit.
Yeah, I remember I met this guy at ORAT 2 years in a row, and he finally bought one in Detroit, and I was like, it's my time to get out.
That's probably exactly what happened.
No, I should have sold to you, man. I actually had three properties there over I think I bought my first one 2019. What it really came down to is I'm getting into other things in my life where my motto is like in the Midwest, you got to go 0 or 10 because if you don't have 10, there's no scale. And I'm already in three other states besides Michigan. So I was like, and the reason why I have three is because I was like, well, if I don't go 0 to 10, I'll buy another one. Then I bought another one. So then I was just like, hey, by getting out of Michigan, that's one less tax thing, one less property manager, one less lender, one less insurance person. And then obviously less landlord tenant laws I have to remember for another. So I took that. Those ones I actually, two of the three I own in my retirement. So I was like, let me convert that into cash and do some private money lending out of the retirement instead, try to simplify things.
Okay, no, that definitely makes sense. Appreciate it, man.
But welcome to the neighborhood. You'll have to let me know where you're at. Actually, my fiance is in Detroit. She actually saw the property for the first time today. It's backs up to 8 Mile. One of my, I think that was my second property I bought there.
Have you ever
Oh,
thought
no
about
kidding. Okay.
your minister to marry you guys? Speaking of fiance, just side question.
I
Dan, I see your hand up. So you don't have to answer that.
Just out of curiosity, how are you selling off with your partners? Are you seller financing to your partners?
so I used to, at the peak I had four partners. Three of them obviously are I've exited, and there's one left. So on the exits, two of them are your straight traditional. We sold, and then we just took the money. So those are easy, right? But one of them is ironically, he was my real estate agent in Seattle, and then I got my license, and he retired. So it was kind of like Chester and me, one get coming in, one going out. But we had this property for a couple years, and he's just like, "Hey, man, I'm just not wanting to do anymore." Because I was back to him, I was like, "If we're gonna have a partnership in the Midwest, you're the 0, or we got to go 10." So the partnership I'm still in, they want to go to 10 and bigger, and they have more money to spend. But that one that I it's actually the first one that I exited, we did do seller finance. So
Okay.
what I did is he deeded the property to me, or no, I should say I bought the LLC. So I
Oh,
gave
okay.
him 20,000. Now that was in my name, I refinanced it a cash out refi. So then I
Mhm.
got the money back. And then
Okay.
I paid him, I'm still paying him. I owed him like 30,000. So I did 60 payments at 500 a month. So
Okay.
on the first of every month he gets $500 and it's in his what we call she money account. It's money
Mhm.
she don't know about. So
Mhm.
it's just goes to his like little play fund, if you will.
All right.
Question on the ones that you said you sold and we just took the money. Does
Right.
that mean took the money means no 1031, paid the taxes?
Correct.
Okay.
No 1031, but um, I'm going through taxes, so working. I'm finishing 23, yes, 23. And then I'm almost done with 24, ironically, at the
You
same
sound
time.
like Michelle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I actually have enough other losses rolling forward that I don't like. I'm paying zero tax in 23, zero tax in 24. So as it
Okay.
right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's why you didn't do the 1031 because you obviously strategized with your CPA that you could offset the gain from the sale of it.
Exactly. Yeah. But I did do two 1031s last year. So
Okay.
some of the other
Um,
ones that I sold personally, I did 1031 those ones.
okay. So that was just more of a tax strategy that, because it gives you more flexibility with cash as opposed to with an exchange.
Exactly. Well, at the time, 100% transparency, I needed some cash. So I was like,
Uh,
well, instead of me, because I could still personally take a 1031 and then my partner do whatever they want, right? Because it got distributed. But for
yeah.
me at the time, I have some development stuff that's been sucking the cash out. And I was like, well, let
Okay.
me just take this to keep funding that project. So I took that money and then the other ones I 1031. And when you guys get into this, when you start owning a lot of properties and you try to sell them, timing is not easy to sell 10 at the
Yeah.
same time. So, that's why I had two 1031s. I kind of the ones I was doing personally had a tranche because
Okay.
of the ones I sold was six. Actually, I sold 13, 10 in Milwaukee, three in Detroit. So I had tranches between Michigan and Wisconsin that I
Yeah.
batched up. And then what I did was, I was telling Dion here earlier, is like, if you do a 1031, if you have a deal set up on a lease with option to purchase, you can control your timeline.
Hmm.
It's not difficult to do a 1031 because the
Oh, that's an
5 days. Go
that's
ahead.
an interesting strategy because I may be in that position for the beginning of 26, and that was my dilemma because I may 1031 or sell or finance my partner, or I may just give him control of the property because we may do some type of rehab or halfway house that I'm not really interested in. It's not my wheelhouse, but hey, he could control it. But I didn't think about so you did like a lease option so you could buy the time. So
Mhm.
that way, when you are ready to exchange out of it, that's actually really, really smart.
That's
Thank you.
pre-identified, ready to close within because you get 45 days to identify, so that goes away.
Yeah.
Then you have 180 days to close.
Yeah.
And that's from the 45 day or
No.
from the beginning?
180
From
total.
the start. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's plenty of time.
So, which a lot of people get that confused, right?
Yeah.
45 minus 180, I think, what is that, 135? So it'd be
Yeah.
45 plus the 135. But like try to always have leases with the option to purchase. So I have two left, lease with the option to purchase, but they're in different entities. One of the lease options is owned in my retirement, so that's like a different beast in itself.
Yeah.
The other one is under my main LLC. So if at any time I'm under the gun, like I'm sitting on a lease option, that's my fallback. So I can always put that on my three
Oh, that's
properties.
okay. Yeah, that actually is extremely beneficial as I'm going to be exchanging one to two properties out of California possibly, but into the Midwest, which is very difficult because it's hard to secure that many properties. So I like the lease option to buy as a fallback a fallback shelter, if I'm ever overrun, so to say.
Yep.
That's really good.
I've
That's
done this. I've done the same as you. It's actually not as hard from because I sold one of my first, what was it when, actually it was my second property I ever bought was an 11 unit. So I sold that back 2018 or something like that. So I sold one 11 unit and I bought five duplexes and a triplex. But when you do that, in the Midwest, there's a lot more properties, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but I would fly into town and I would just had um, my inspector with me and the agent. So we would go tour like 10 properties a day, in,
Yeah.
out, and then it's just inspector goes, yes, no,
Uh-huh.
and then that way, like, then I leave and I say, here's the 10 I want to put offers on, you know, and then ultimately it comes down to how many I get under contract.
Yeah, I'm flying out next month, and I was going to do something similar there. But my only concern is that it's a real tight market right now. I don't think so I've kind of like need to project me for 2026.
Hmm.
I just don't think I could exchange. I don't know, but that strategy that might give me the confidence to actually. I never thought about that. That's actually really smart.
One thing you can look at, just kind of throwing it out there, typically what I'm seeing in the Midwest, you get people that are trying to exit. Hence, I was trying to exit. Like if you would have
Uh-huh.
came to me and said, "Hey, I'll buy all your properties if I can adjust the timing," I would have taken that. So go look on the market right now. There's somebody out there that owns multiple properties probably selling.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they're sitting on the market for call it 30 days or more, you can reach out to that agent and be like, would they be open to this idea? I'm selling a property I need, and then you can buy their portfolio. And so, yeah, you're buying multiple properties, but it's one transaction.
Yeah, I actually like I may do that because I do know of a couple of them that are have a portfolio, and I know there's some that are pretty good. The other ones I'm like, yeah, if I have to, I'll take them. But
Right.
if maybe I'll use that as a negotiation strategy. If we could basically instead of negotiating the terms so much, if we can negotiate the time,
Hmm.
that is important to me, which I would imagine in your situation was important to you. So we both time is important to both of us, but differently. You know,
100%.
thank you. That's pretty good.
Any other 1031 questions are totally welcome. My question is, okay, so you got into several markets.
Mhm.
How do you find your property managers?
So, property managers, I used to work at Amazon, and they're big into this kind of working backwards thing. So, I'll talk about my first, um, call it long distance, was like 3 hours away. So, Seattle to Yakima. And I'm like, well, I don't know anybody in Yakima. But I was listening to BiggerPockets and they kept interviewing this guy they called the king of Yakima. And so I'm like, I got to find out who this guy is because I want to buy this property over in Yakima. And lo and behold, he was at a local real estate meetup. And I was a new guy. I was super like nervous going to these things. And in the old days, they would circle, we'd all get in the circle, maybe like 15 people, and we all face each other and they'd be like, okay, do introductions. And then I go, I'm here to see the king of Yakima, Enrique Jevons. And then he raised his hand and I'm like, oh, I need to talk to you. That's literally how I got my first one. But when I went out of state, totally different model. I didn't know anything about Milwaukee. In hindsight, I would have gone to almost everybody has a local Facebook group. Like Mike has his, I'm assuming he actually probably runs the Facebook group for Gary. So there's a Milwaukee Brew City. I should have got into that sooner. But what I did is I worked backwards and I said, I was looking at properties in a specific area that on paper looked great. So then I would just see what property manager showed up the most in that area. And then I would talk to them. And so that's how I found my first property manager is that this lady, it was at Berkshire Hathaway, was specifically in this area that I was looking at all the properties. She had the most like listings live. Like this seems like she's probably in the area, knows the market, is experienced in it. That's who I went with. But I did talk to a couple other ones, but I ultimately ended on that.
Have you fired property managers?
Yeah, I fired that.
What's your criteria for saying, okay, I have to cut ties with that person?
So at the end of the day, what for me comes down to is like um, getting response time and being able to. I'm a bit, conceptually, I'm an asset manager, right? So like, if I can't help you help me manage my asset, that's usually the first thing. So, and what I've seen over the years, because my manager now in Milwaukee, who I may fire soon,
Is that the one you introduced Frank to? Or is that a
uh,
different
is Smart Asset?
one?
Smart
Probably.
asset. Yeah,
Yeah.
smart asset.
Go into all the detail.
Yeah. So we'll cover that one later. But Smart Asset is probably my fifth or sixth one over the years. So my thing was like, as I started growing, the lady I had didn't have good systems. And so what I learned from the king of Yakima, he uses that folio. I'm like, well, that's nice. So then as I started getting these other ones, they didn't have AppFolio. I'm like, that's cumbersome. Now I have different systems. I got to extract the data, which Michelle leads to difficulty in filing taxes, as you well know. So what I would do is I go buy a new property and I would just keep that new property manager and be like, man, if they're good, why don't I, they're better than what I got, then let me ship to them. And I just did that like four times in a row. So it's kind of like by having multiple properties and realizing that, hey, this other one's actually performing better, just get rid of the other one. But typically, for me, it boils down, can I trust them to help me manage my asset and at a good cost structure? So now I'll give you a backdrop of what I normally see for property management companies. They start out small shop. They're doing it because they probably have some rentals. They start growing and building up and getting scale, and then they have a good pricing model, and they're able to service that. Typically, then they go big, and then they're like, "Hey, I can save money by getting my own manage or my own maintenance crew." And then what inevitably happens is that now they got all this overhead, and then magically your expense ratio goes up. So over time, some of the reasons why I fired people is that I'm like, guys, you can't just why are my expenses so high? Like you're just showing up at the property and you're fixing a bunch of stuff. Like if the doorknob's broken, tell the tenant to fix it. Like don't send somebody out there, it costs $100, right? So that's typically what ends up making me start looking for somebody else. I feel like somebody about better can manage it and I can get a better cost structure. So
Lighting issues. Sorry. Did that answer your next question, Chester?
Yeah, so that actually was the very next thing I was going to ask about in terms of like the sort of value that property managers are delivering to you with respect to, whether it's like a tiered or a cost structure, and as far as like the overall performance that you had touched on. So definitely appreciate that, Justin.
no problem.
So when you downsized, you were leaving one market specifically.
Right.
Was there a reason that was the market you chose to get out of? You said you want to go to 10 in each one.
hmm
What was the detractors that said, okay, this is the one I want to exit?
Uh, Specifically Michigan, I only had three properties there relatively. I think I sold them all aggregate 400,000. So we're not talking super expensive.
So it was kind of the easiest one to get out of for your situation, not like you looked at two markets and said, I love this one sucks.
It
It's
was
more the size of your portfolio. Okay.
size of portfolio and back to that portfolio. My property manager that I met when I flew into town, I met a couple people and I went with basically an all-American dad, uh, small time guy. and just good people. But he didn't have it. He's just an Excel spreadsheet. But he was my guy A to Z for the whole time. Great guy. But doesn't have Appfolio, which Michelle, back to our earlier discussion, makes it harder for taxes. So there's some like super simple, not very deep thought. It's just like this is the easiest thing for me to cut loose. Now, I only own two properties in Iowa, but those are two aplexes. So like that I bought for 1 million. So there's just more just asset value there for me to keep it.
Which market are you in? Do you think that's appreciating the fastest or the most?
So in the last couple of years, I would say it was Milwaukee. And actually there was just a report. If you follow the guy, Your First Million, I think it is, on Instagram, he just posted like it's up 20% like year over year or something like that. Because what I bought 17, 18, 19, and I just recently sold, all has doubled. Now, what I'm doing, I'm in Seattle, full-time investor. I have my license as well. So in Seattle, you can buy, do forced appreciation. There's a lot more equity play locally because there's just not enough housing, and you can do the detached accessory dwelling units is like the hottest thing in our area. So I'm focusing on that because like in the right area you can make 250 to 500,000 per dadu, and they're changing the code to do two per lot. So you could do a $500,000 project um, in Seattle if you get the right house, right location on the lot. I mean, it's like just a no-brainer, because you do one of those every 2 years, you know.
Is there room for one of those down at the bottom here where you park?
Yeah.
You think? Oh, good.
Yeah, you could with you got to watch the height. So you could have them park underneath and then have on top. And it's because you in Seattle you can only do 1,000 square feet as of today. I'm assuming it's 1,000 here, but you could do a one level 1,000. You can have parking underneath it. That way because typically when you're building new, they want to make sure you have at least an existing on-site parking. So I'm assuming the city's the same.
Probably.
But you don't want to go too high because then you don't want
You
to
lose
block
the view, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Although it would be a good place to end the zip line.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could have zip line to your other unit.
There you go.
You could zip line down, do your videos, and then
It'll be easier to get
hike
down to
up.
the water that way.
Yeah.
Right. Frank, howdy. I know you're always patient and taking notes and have questions at the end. I'm seeing if you have any questions now.
I was just thinking, Justin, you mentioned that you are getting rid of Smart Asset. Did you say who you're going to, or do you need one in Milwaukee since you were selling properties?
I am still with Smart Asset. I meet with them actually every week. Now, Smart Asset's been great for me as I built a portfolio. So, when they hired like a Brian White, I don't know if you talking about him, but
Yeah.
so when they hired him like maybe a year after I got in there, I have direct access to him, and I basically did a volume model. So I'm at 6% because I structured it where when I came on board I had, I don't know, 50-ish units. And then I ended up saying, hey, like, I'm quite a bit of business, when you take all the rents and everything, I'm like, I could pay a full-time person. So I worked it to where we went from 10 to 8 at like 80 doors. And then at 100 doors, I went to 6%. Now I sold off all those I don't know, let's see, 20 to 25 units. They haven't changed my pricing back. So that's been nice. But they have a big crew of in-house management, and it seems like my cost is high. So then I started trying to find local GCs to do my flips. If I'm circumventing, that's the problem. Now I have more time involvement. So that's my whole thing is the unit turns are just too high cost. And so, but now that I've been bringing other people in, it's kind of, you know, dissipated some. But if I had a good GC, because I'm still working through GCs, I just still haven't found like my go-to guy. If I had a good GC, it wouldn't necessarily the property manager becomes less important. So, but I have so low cost with them. If I had a good GC, that would keep them honest on my turns. But I don't know about you, man. I have some guy that's good, and then they either fizzle out or like they just stop responding, and so I'm like like as soon as they get good, I have to find another one. So I'm in the process of trying to find a new one.
That's
Yeah,
kind of when I hear the same, even though I'm like here personally dealing with them.
Yeah,
You get 3 to 6 months out of them, they get their life back together, and then they realize they can get a real job
yeah,
or become a GC, even just handyman contractor
yeah.
level.
Or they become an investor themselves, and then you're now less important to them.
Okay, so we got pick to market, why left, how to fire a property manager. Uh, you are like Cody Davis, working on right sizing your portfolio.
Hmm.
What does right sized look like for
Yeah.
you?
My motto, this goes back to because I have scaled fast, which actually Cody and I, obviously he went bigger in terms of total count. My peak, I was 145, 4 states, 4 different partnerships, different property managers, creative finance, short term, medium term, long term, in state, out of state, doing wholesaling. It's becomes a cluster when you're trying to account for all that. So like I probably have 15 bank accounts managing all this stuff. And then you layer on lines of credit, you layer on loans, and you layer on credit cards. So, basically what happens is now that I'm trying to travel more, trying to keep up with all this stuff becomes cumbersome. And so I'm like, well, I only sell off, it's doubled in price in the Midwest. Take that money, you know, if I can, typically I try to lease option locally, sell 1031, even if it's less cash flow, but it will appreciate more and simplify my life. Like that's good for me. So that's why I've been downsizing is complexity means more time, harder taxes, less freedom for when I want to travel, and then when I'm on travel, not having issues when I'm traveling.
Okay. So my business model is one checking account, one saving account, one credit card, one spreadsheet, one tab for income, one tab for expenses,
Hmm.
and then a deposit account. I miss things.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a lease renewal. There's this person, I didn't even talk to them, and now I don't have the notice, so I've got to renew 2 months after it expired or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you track? And you are, you know, simplifying it.
Hmm.
How do you track everything?
I do everything in a Google Sheet. So, um, and the reason why it's a Google Sheet, so it's easier to share with my bookkeeper real time. And then I save it down for taxes. And then for taxes, I have to, I'm fresh into this, so it's, you know, still have open wounds. So like I have to go through and then categorize what I bought for the year, what I sold in the year, what I refinanced in the year, what I converted from a lease option to a purchase, what properties are linked from the sale to the purchase on a 1031, and then I have to take all those documents and load them into a portal. So like what I've been doing is I have all these by year of the portfolio. So it has everything, even the stuff that I sold because they need to know what I sold. And then I track all my what do you call them? Settlement statements because I have to load the settlement statement so that they can, process all that on the books. So everything is in Google Sheets, and then I save down a copy and log it for specifically that year.
And everything in Google Sheets, is this information that you put in there or information your CPA said they needed?
It's information I put in there because I had, as I was growing up, you know, this sounds funny, but it's like I forget I own properties. So like I was doing 2024 and I was like, this property was not even on the list. I'm like, oh man, how did I miss it? So I had inadvertently cut a line out. So there's like not even showing a property in there. So, but it's all because I wanted it. And then I was like, well, I'd grown so fast that I wasn't even looking at what was coming in or what was going out, how much my cash flowing. And then as I started doing more social media stuff, I would do podcasts and like, well, how many properties do you own? I'd be like, well, that's like, 30, and then how many, units and all that. And so I didn't know. So I had created these Google Sheets. And then I was like, well, how much income's coming in, And then like at one point in time, I think it was like 120,000 a month of like rental income. Um, but and a lot of money comes in, a lot of money goes out. And so then the other thing, which I have learned over the time, is the secret wealth is really the debt payoff. Like at my peak, I was paying down 15K of debt a month. So like if you think about that, 15K of debt pay down is 15K of net worth increase, right? Assuming flat appreciation. So, and then towards the peak there, if I just assume like 3% increase and my debt pay down, that's like a 500,000 of net worth increase a year. So it's like you can, when you start getting into those numbers, you're like, wow, this is like pretty amazing. The other thing is you'll start realizing is because I'm doing my taxes right now, there's a lot of properties that I'm losing money. So it's like, as I'm selling, let me Jack Welch these bottom third and then, keep culling the herd of the bottom ones and then try to improve the collective whole of it.
Yeah, straight from business, running a business. Once
Yeah,
something's measured, it can be improved. If you
100%.
don't know, you don't even know which ones to call.
Right.
And I don't know how active you are on social media, but the more podcasts that you go on and you get those questions, I would have no idea what my net worth is. I would have no idea what
Hmm.
my cash flow is. So I'm going to make a video, so I've got to actually go look at this and stuff.
Right.
So before we get to Chester's question, Mikey asks from Hawaii, in those weekly PM talks, could you talk about discussion that improved your portfolio management?
The biggest thing is I have to tell them, hey guys, if we don't improve this, I'm guaranteed to go bankrupt. Like, you can't, like, the other month, this is like real data. I had an 83% expense ratio. Now, that's because I had some unit turns in there. And then I was like, guys, between vacancies and unit turns, like, less than a year, I guarantee you I'll be bankrupt. Because, like, you can't have 80% ratio, right? You should be like, typically if you're like a syndicator, like 40%, roughly somewhere in there. So I'm like, then that's all expenses, right? Because I was just talking about property management. That's before I got to PITI. So imagine that, guys. So you're gonna be shelling out every month, right? So my agent business was feeding the rental business. So
Yeah, the lumberjack landlord was just talking about doing his taxes last year. He lost $250,000
yeah.
before depreciation.
Whoa.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
he was at $100,000 a month going out in rehabs and
Yeah.
whereas end result once it's done, and like Frank's got a couple that he was having fixed and a couple of vacancies.
Hmm.
That period of time, you just feel broke no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's getting past that that matters.
Yeah. And this is because I wasn't keeping up on my books. Because like for the last year and a half, 2 years, I wasn't keeping up with my books. The doing development, so hard money, right? And then I was making actually more money I ever made at Amazon as an agent. And I'm like, where's the fucking money? Like almost made 300,000 as an agent. And I'm like, where's the fucking money? And you have to go down and like the unit turns are costing a lot of money and my vacancies are high. So back to the weekly meeting, I was like, guys, this is the problem. We got to fill them, keep them in longer, lower turn costs. It's like literally raise the income, lower the expenses. Back to basics. And so now I was like, we have to meet weekly. And so now I have like the CFO on these calls. I'm like, run me a report. Like, I swear I'm like 1 to 2 thousand a month of just evictions of people owe me money. You know, I'm sure I've lost over 100,000 just in the people we've evicted with bad debt. It's like these numbers, when you start multiplying small percentage times 145 units, this can go high or down fast, which I guarantee that's what happened with Cody because he was doing all these money, and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. As long as you have as long as you have enough Peters to pay the
Yeah.
Pauls, you're okay. But
Cody came here a couple of months ago, and during the thing, he said, "Yeah, I was doing some sales to make up for the loss on these other properties."
mhm. Back to why did I take some of that money and not pay the 1031 or do the 10? That's it.
Needed the money from it. Yep.
Cody and I different. He's 20 years plus younger than me, but if you rapidly scale, you're gonna have that problem, right? And then the worst part about this whole thing is my fiance is like, I told you so, which she did 3 years, 3 or 4 years, like, don't buy any more properties, slow it down.
It's too bad you don't know somebody who has a small portfolio and seems content.
Yeah, I
Chester,
know.
you
I
have a
know.
question, Chester.
I'm gravitating to you because I hang out with you more and talk to you more.
That's the
That's
goal.
literally
And
it.
I actually think of 1031ing. We were talking today, selling everything, moving to another state, only because I know people who've actually sold properties and you're alive still, doing okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chester.
Uh, I was going to ask, since you guys had touched on performance, and you had mentioned like some of the systems that you use to evaluate your properties, Justin, is that kind of the same that, especially with you moving out of Detroit and looking at other markets, is that kind of a similar strategy, I guess, in terms of evaluating performance on a market basis as well?
So for Detroit, we talked about small dollar amount. The other thing about Detroit, I just had high turnover, man. Uh, like I had a property for like 5 years and just I bought it for 25,000. $1,000 down, $1,000 a month, 0% interest. So who is it, Mike, that says you can go broke with cheap properties? Or
Yeah.
somebody says that.
Yep. You can
That
go broke
was
buying cheap. Super.
that was the one, right? I ultimately ended up selling it for 91,000. But that specific property for 5 years, I had at least 3 evictions. And one of those evictions, I evicted her multiple times because it was COVID. Evicted her, then the lockdown or whatever happened again. So she reset the clock. Then I had to evict her again. And then she subleased it to her somebody. So she wasn't paying me for a year. Then she subleased it. She was getting the rent. Bravo on her. Hate the game,
Been
right?
there.
Yeah. So then I had to evict the person that she subleased to. Yeah. But Detroit specifically, yes, smaller dollar amount. I just had a lot of turnover and I was like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore.
Okay, no, that definitely makes sense.
But you might have a better. I was buying in C class. So most of my Milwaukee C class. The Detroit was C class. Except two of the three were C class. The one that wasn't in C class, thanks, set it and forget it, man. That one was like great the whole time. So, as I'm selling and buying new, I'm trying to go from C to B. So less better tenants is another thing, which I think that's what you're doing. You do the binder strategy. If they are smart, they raise it. That's your kind of indicator. They're probably a good tenant and trustworthy, right?
Yeah, and as you were mentioning that, I was thinking about, I was like, in looking at a few properties now, one duplex that I was, hoping to be able to kind of move forward on, that is like right outside of Grosse Pointe. So, that area is sort of like, I guess you could call like B area because again, everything Grosse Pointe is like, just solid A, or even A plus if you want to, think of it that way. But yeah, definitely was something in terms of like almost kind of street by street or block by block strategy with Detroit. So definitely understand that.
Milwaukee and Detroit are the same. Like, there's one spot in Milwaukee, like where it's called Sherman Park, and kind of a rougher area, but there's this one street. It is sweet. The road is literally twice as wide, and they've got all these, like, I think of walnut trees, all homeowners. Just this one strip. But then on the other side is just chaos, right? But Detroit is the same way. So, because I relied on my boots on the ground, if I wanted to buy anything, I'd run it by him first. I go, "Would you manage this?" He goes, "Yes." I put an offer. If he says no, no offer. Specifically, gross point, that's the old money for the auto guys. If you're gross point on the water, you're not buying the rental there. It's not going to cash flow. But as you get on the periphery of gross point, my one that was set it and forget it was on East Point. And then the reason why it's called East Point is that it used to be called East Detroit and it had such a bad name they rebranded it. Because anything with point in it in that area is associated to money in the auto. So if you can get over in that gross point as close as you can get, to me that was a good area. And my East Point one, I like that one. It did well the whole time, all the way up to when they moved out, and I was like, hey, let's just fix up and sell it.
This might be
Oh,
for future land. Just a second, Dan. Just for anybody who watches in the future, if because some people in the course aren't members on YouTube, and on YouTube, when we analyze deals, the two ways we talk about learning if a street or a local market is one we would want to own in is the first thing. Call property managers, and as an investor, saying, "I'm thinking of buying rentals in this area. Would you manage on this street or in this area?" The second way is to call law enforcement, the non-emergency police number. You don't want to be an investor because they don't want to talk to landlords because they don't want tenants. Tenants where all the cop issues come from. You say, I'm thinking of buying properties to live in this area. Is this a safe street or is this a bad street? They'll usually be pretty open about that.
That's
Okay.
the first I heard of that. I love
Oh,
that.
nice.
Yeah.
Dan?
There you go. First, thanks for being so transparent. It's extremely, extremely helpful. And I really thought you had some amazing systems in place. I think it's impressive that you're able to manage all that from Google Docs. Like, I think that should be a book all in itself. Um, but my question is, I'm getting ready to scale up, and I'm trying to. So I would say that it's perfect to have the two of you together because I've learned so much from attending ORAD a couple times and people that have been in your situation and from Dion. I'm 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 more towards Dion, but I want to scale up a little faster. I've added 5 single family properties in the last 12 months, and I plan on adding 10 the next 12 months. But I do know that my systems are, let me be transparent, my lack of good systems, that it will most likely not have a good outcome. So, this question goes to both of you, what systems would you have in place if you were to do it all over again so you could scale appropriately? Stessa, I'm using Stessa right now. I've tried Excel spreadsheet and you know,
So hindsight's obviously 2020. So, and this is so now I have like coaching clients myself. And so as I'm working with them, I start off with like treating them as a business. I'd look at income statement, i.e. their budget, balance sheet, i.e. their net worth. As you scale up, having more reserves and stabilizing the property. So this is what I teach. And then for my agent clients, like there's a guy that has, you know, money to spend. And we just bought a property. It's got 3 units on it. And I was like, stabilize this one first, right? So he just filled the 3 units. Okay, now you've got income that you know is in versus your expenses, and because it was during the winter, which I know it's your favorite time, but it was like he got a little bit less rent, so his cash flow isn't as big now. So it's like, okay, now you know where you're at, and then tack on. So if I was to do it again, I would listen to my fiance and then slow it down, increase the reserves, stabilize, buy the next one. And the other thing I would have done is I should have scaled bigger, right? Meaning I kept doing duplexes because that was easy. So effectively, I was working at Amazon. Every time I had 15,000, I buy a property. I go meet my banker in South Lake Union, five signatures, another property, because it was like 60 to 80,000 and it was only like 20%. So 15, 20,000. So like at my peak, I was buying like every other month. I just go on there, easy. But in hindsight, I should have went to fourplex, then the eightplex, and then 16, just because the reason why I have so much issue on my bookkeeping is because I could have one property with 145 doors, but I had 45. So that's 40. There's a lot. Uh, Door count is not necessarily difficult to manage. Property count is is harder to manage. So as you're scaling, don't, hindsight being 2020, instead of buying a bunch of duplexes like I did, I should have went duplex, fourplex, eightplex, or bought something in Seattle that is 400,000, which is like, five duplexes at the time. So I'm scaling dollar amount on a transaction level because like I burn a lot of time transacting. So yeah, am I good at transacting? Yeah, because I just did it all the time. But I could have taken that time and done less deals, more dollar amount of deals.
So I have
Okay,
two
that makes
questions, but I want to answer this question first, and then I have two questions for you. The first, so if you want to scale, I really like the idea of buying a property, stabilizing before you buy another. Maybe if you have the income, buy one or two, stabilize, which means the repairs are done and it's rented,
Right.
and I'm getting like at least 1 month's worth of rent after they move in to make sure it's not going to be an eviction right away. Then add the next ones. But so if I was going to scale again, this is what I would do. Uh, from the beginning, I would have a system. I don't care if it's Hemlane, or hot pads, or whatever platform, Stessa, whatever, be on one platform. Dedicate the time to learn its front end, its back end, to list your properties and to track the data. I would have done that way sooner. I'm just now
okay.
starting to do that. And the second thing, I'd have a handyman army.
Mm,
Subcontractors, which ones are plumbers, which ones can do flooring, which ones are licensed to go higher than 8 feet because they've got that roofing insurance. And I mean, like, I've gone down sometimes where I've had one or two, and that's been the nightmare. It's a minimum of
okay.
five people that you can call that aren't connected for when you need something when you're traveling or when you're working. Um, and then get to know that investor group that's investing in the same area, no matter where they live. So if you're investing in Milwaukee, find the people that live in Georgia, California, and Washington that are in the local groups of investors at the meetups, the online stuff, because that's going to be your resource. Reaching out and, hey, who's had luck with a property manager and getting somebody else's response, right? So that's my answer to that question. My first question for you on the scaling from duplex to fourplex to eightplex. What's
Mhm.
your current debt structure look like?
In terms of
How
debt
much fixed
ratio?
rate do you have? And how much adjustable rate do you have? How many balloon payments do you expect in the next 10 years? How many loan reevaluation periods do you think you'll have? Like,
Mm,
Okay, so that's a lot. So I'll
not
start.
all of it, just like
Yeah.
round fuzzy numbers.
Um, so part of the other reason why I was selling, lesson I learned, I should have locked in on 30-year DSCR at 4%, right? So it was easy to do all these. Hey, Hendra, my US bank, five signatures, I buy a property. So I had all these loans. Here's another reason why I probably should have slowed down because the bank told me that they wouldn't lend anymore because I bought too much too fast. Okay, hindsight 2020. So uh,
mm,
the debt structure, I then because I was like, hey, well, the other thing, COVID literally happened. As I was under contract, they're like, we're gonna make an exception because we have 18 loans already with it. We'll give you this other one. Like, great. Which then forced me to go find somebody else, and I went to a local credit union, and then I refinanced 20-ish, something like that, all at 5-year debt, 3.5%. Yahtzee for 5 years. So guess what year the 5-year ends? 2025. So last year, so I'm doing these developments, which I'm stroking 10,000 a month on holding costs. So think about that. So I have money going out. I know I've got a wall coming up, i.e. the balloon. So I'm like, I need some money. I can't refi. My DSCRs are like 8%, right? So 3.5 to 8%. Basically it's going to double my payment. So I was like, I can get rid of partnerships. I can simplify my life. I can sell now 1031 into something else with creative financing and avoid selling when I have to sell, right? And I knew at the market it's double. I can control my destiny because I didn't know who the president was going to be. I was like, let me be proactive. I already screwed up and I didn't lock in long-term debt. I'm like, lesson learned, like, let me not paint myself into a corner. Let me unwind. So less is more, unwind, simplify. But secretly, if I'm already having liquidity issues on these developments, if I double my payment, now I've got Peter is broke. I can't rob Peter to pay Paul. So that was another reason why I was like, this all is triangulating around. Let's make sure that, what's that rules like, lesson one is you want to get out of the game, but and then lesson two is you never want to go back. So I was like, this is self-preservation. Like if I sell these properties when I know they have equity, I can control my own outcome. Versus if I wait till now, all these balloons come up, then I'm struggling, right? So back to your question on how many you got ballooning. I have three right now, two in Milwaukee, one locally. Um, Ironically, I was like, what can I do in the traffic on the way here? Oh crap, I've got that property that balloons 12.1, and this is a seller finance deal that I got 3% down, 5.75. He's adamant on 5.75. At the time, interest rates were 4%. I'm like, just let me do this deal. It's actually negative cash flowing. Alligator, Zuber hates that. But I took the deal. And the smart, savvy guy, which I thought being a non-issue at the time, was if I refinance that property early, he gets all the interest for the 5 year. So if 1 year goes by, I sell, I refi, I still pay him, excuse me, 4 years of interest. When I figured that out, because I get deal heat, I'd already done the deal, and I'm like, what's this mean? It's like, holy crap. Um, Guess how much interest is on the 5 year? I'll just see if you guys can figure it out. The property I bought was 400,000.
Oh, it's 80. Just quick math.
It was 100,000.
Yeah.
So I'm tied into this guy. Now, fast forward, I'm coming up on the balloon. I can control my deadline. We got these blue laws here. I have to give them 90-day notice. And I'm like, crap, 90-day, their lease renews, I think it's 6/1 or 7/1, something like that. Let's see, what's it, April? It must be 7/1. So like I have to give them notice Monday to put on their door, right? So to sell it. Because if I don't, then they keep moving that 90-day window. And then if I've got to fix it up, get it on the market and sell it. But if I sell it too early, I've got to pay them, for whatever 4 months of interest. So it's like, so I literally called him on the way here. I was like, hey, this Justin, just checking to see we have that loan ballooning. This guy's 85 or something by now. Just seeing if you'd be open to it extending the loan or if you're looking to cash out. I'm planting a seed with this guy for him to say, I'm open to extending. Because if he says he's open to extending, I'll parlay that just, you know, what is that? Blend and what's
The blended rate, right?
not blended, but you these commercial loans, they're keeping, they're pushing out the term.
Okay.
There's a term for it that Zuber says all the time. I
Is
forget
it
it.
extend and pretend or
That's
extend
it.
and hope or something?
Extend and pretend,
Okay.
right? So I could just keep extending it. Or if he says he wants the money now, I'm like, here's my angle. So as you guys get into these creative financing deals, you have to strategize on your discussion topics. So then I was like, if he says, no, I need the money now, he's 85. So he's probably going to want the money now. I'd be like, okay, well, here's my thought, because the agreement here is if I sell early, that I have to pay the full interest. So what I was thinking of doing is I'll just wait and then I'll sell it right in November. But if you want the money now, if we can agree on, I just give you the money and we don't pay that interest, that way you have your money today, right? So I'm trying to strategize on all these things, which I'm sure Cody does. When you have all these different triggers and the creativity creates complexity. So I have to manage all this in my mind on the Google spreadsheet and all that, which I now have a balloon period in there. Because like when you're 5 years away, no big deal. But as you get within
5 years is
yeah,
investing. Yeah.
yeah. So when you're in banks are like this, if the I think it's 12 months. When you go from 13 months to the 12 month, they have to now start analyzing and recognizing if there's issues. So yeah. So I'm selling two more in Milwaukee because they have balloons coming out, and then just get more liquidity. The other thing is I actually am doing finishing 23 tax. It actually shows that I lost 300,000. So I'm like, well, shit, I can sell more properties now, roll that, just take the cash today. So I was like, this kind of makes sense. Get some more liquidity, and then keep on rolling.
So I have two more questions, and if anybody has a question, feel free to jump in. The first one, you were saying you instead of going for duplexes, you would go 2, 4, 8, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
With the portfolio the size that you have, you might not have this data, but this is just in case you kind of have it on the top of your head. Do you have more turnover in duplexes or eightplexes?
Hmm. It's not discernible, but I know 100% in my Milwaukee, my single families, which I just recently bought and been burning. So I buy it, fix it up, rehab it, rent it out. So those have been my saviors. So rents and maybe Frank, you're seeing this. Man, these rents for single family have just like skyrocketed. Because like I'm getting like what I was getting like 900-ish. I'm like a couple years later, I'm at like 1600 on like a 4.2 in a not great area. So those have been my like, you know, the cash cows that have been covering up some of the turnover. But
So the cash cow is the single
mhm,
family,
yeah,
but the logic train you went down was you wish you'd gone eightplexes.
yeah.
So that's why I'm bringing that up. And the last thing I want to ask, and there's still time for more questions. Let's say you took all of the money that you invested
Hmm.
in all of these other markets,
Hmm.
and you invested in Pierce, Thurston, Snohomish counties. So outside of King County, but
Hmm.
in Washington State.
Hmm.
Same amount of money that you have invested.
Right.
What do you think that would look like today?
Oh man, 2 to 3x equity. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot because like we just had dinner together here and we were talking about I am actually a renter. I was living in my house hack for 8 years. I rented my house out, my 1 bedroom, for more than a 2 bedroom an hour outside. So now I've lowered my cost structure. And so, which got me thinking, the very first property I bought, lucky as hell. I just knew like, hey, if I have land, that's optionality. So that first property I have right now, I have a little of my parking has kind of decreased a little bit. On that one property, I cash flow 4,000 a month. If I just had five of these, sounds like somebody I know. If I just had five of those, which I'm actually land banking because I can build 8 houses on that lot. But I'm like, there's if it's making 4,000, why spend all the money?
If you watch a video that Justin and I did in 2021, we talked about the potential of that 8 unit in that
Yeah,
video.
that was the first
First
video
time we
we did.
talked, yeah.
Yeah. After you presented at Amazon with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So those were my two questions. What you're doing is phenomenal and it's super successful. The high cost of living,
Mhm.
expensive state, you would have had like one deal a year, one deal every other year, three times the equity.
Mhm.
Versus, I think you're younger than I am, and you started investing like 8, 9 years ago,
Yeah, 2016. I think I
2016.
was like 33 or 34 or
Yep. I
something like
think you
that.
were the millennial Mike range of dopamine hit from I want to close on a deal, have 10
Yeah,
offers out and have a bird going on over here.
yeah,
So I think part of it is what's your age, what's your goal? Neither strategy's right.
hmm,
And both of these are us looking in hindsight. Because
100%.
right now in Washington, everybody's like, well, you can't find anything that cash flows and it's probably going to crash. Like
Hmm.
we've been saying that for 10 years.
Yeah,
So cool. Any
but
other questions coming in from anybody and anything that you would
I'll,
like to cover?
just to follow up on that, I I've gotten wiser in my years. So I'll be 46 this year. And what I'm learning is now that I'm doing coaching and have an agent business, I have 4 people on my team. And as we have clients that come in, I'm getting much more. I'm basically a recovering drug addict because I needed the hit, right? And so as I'm doing these deals, I'm actually talking my clients out of deals because of my personal experience. And so it's like we need to have higher standards, higher margins, and find ways to make that deal better. So, for example, this lady who's on my team, she was my client first. I met her at Amazon. She became, we became friends through the club I created there. She then was a client of mine as an agent, got her license, and then she joined the team. I helped her on a deal that is a duplex in Lakewood. And the duplex, she bought it. There was a family there, low rents. She moved them out, fixed them up. I think she raised the rent, I don't know, 400 or 500 bucks. But I have this property. I brought it up to her and I was like, if you don't buy this, will you lend me the money on it? And that, boom, she's like, I'm buying it. The reason why is that it's like, I think it's almost a half acre. And the duplex is set in the back. So you have basically a quarter acre in the front. So much optionality here. Goes back to what was my number one best property is the first property to have all this extra land. So as my gift to her, as the agent, I had Ray. Ray, if you guys,
Photographer.
photographer Ray, PNW Biz, I think. I had him bring his drone out. I went and bought cones at Home Depot. I laid out all the cones and we took aerial shots of the lot and then had her set up all that on. She has 11 parking spots on Neighbor. I think she has 6 of them rented, so she's making 6 to 900 somewhere on that. So, what was an okay deal when you add all that cash on the parking lot? Jackpot. And she's not even filled the lot up. The other thing is, we ran through all the analysis on you could do a dadu today, but the detached accessory dwelling unit, the cost to build versus sell was not great. In the future, we'll probably subdivide that lot and you could do a duplex there or a single family with a dadu. So this one relatively, you know, most people overlook this. It was sitting on the market for a while. But now that I have all these traumatic brain issues, if you will, now as I look at these properties from all these different angles, there's multiple ways to make money and basically protect downside. So I'm just getting flashback. I was at Berkeley when I had my MBA class. We were looking at options, and you do different option strategies to protect your downside and give you upside. So as I look at deals nowadays, that's what I'm looking for. That downside protections, creative finance, that's option land banking, that's parking, that's you name it. There's all these other ways to add more income and give you upside so that if the market structure changes, you can, once you're out, you stay out, right? So that's my biggest change as I look back on things.
And I'm going to stop the recording there. This will be uploaded to the course because now I want to talk about all the gray area sketchy stuff that gets us sued.